So a question that is often asked is, how do I deal with anger? Suppose that you are meditating and you feel anger coming up, but how do you deal with that? Or suppose you're not meditating, but you simply feel that anger is becoming a problem in your life. You have a problem with forgiving certain people or dealing with certain people who are frustrating you. The Buddha, he taught a simple teaching on how to deal with anger. He gave in total 5 ways in how we can deal with anger in one teaching. The first thing he said is to spread loving kindness to that person, which means we develop the counterpart. This seems like an open, doesn't seem very far-fetched at all. It seems very likely that this answer was going to come. But it's actually more, requires a little bit explanation. Some people, they think that when you are hating someone or angry with someone, that it's impossible to deal with that in a kind way. But when we practice, for example, meditation on loving kindness, or when we try to develop positive thoughts to other people around us, even if we do not concentrate on that person that we're angry with, it helps us for the mind to become softer, helps us for the mind to become easier, to become more pliant, you find it easier to concentrate. You find it easier to actually forgive that person. So the first method we can use is loving kindness. The second method is compassion. Compassion means that we think of all the suffering that person might endure. For example, if we know that someone has the habit of always gossiping, so we are angry with that person because the person is a gossip and tends to gossip about us, then in that case we might think of how that person might suffer because of his own habit. We might not be able to see that suffering, but actually the person is also suffering because of his own bad habits. And try to think, how could this person be freed from suffering? May this person be freed from suffering. Try to develop compassionate thoughts to that person. And again, the same method can be applied even if we find it hard to develop compassion for the person we hate. We can start with the people around us that we appreciate, that we find easier to develop compassion for. And we will find that makes our mind softer, more pliant, and it becomes easier also to forgive our enemies. The third method is equanimity, which is about being able to recognize that sometimes the best way to deal with our emotions is simply to allow them to be. We cannot always control our emotions, but we do not always need to respond to them either. We do not always need to act on them either. So how about if we just learn to allow our emotions to be? That is not easy in the beginning, but with meditation and practice we can learn. The fourth method is simply when our anger is really strong, it's best simply not to do anything. Not to pay any attention to the person that we're angry with. If we can avoid that person, sometimes it's the best if we are really angry with that person. They say that when you're angry, do not speak, do not write a letter, because our anger will spill into our actions. So sometimes it's good to just be quiet and sit and allow the anger to pass, to become softer, to become less. That is also a way to deal with anger. And the last and final method is that we reflect on the law of karma. According to Buddhism, every single deed that we do has an effect. And every single deed that any other person in the world does has an effect. So why would we be angry with anyone if we know that that person will suffer as a consequences of his own wrongdoing? We do not need to be angry with a person because that person will suffer from his own deeds anyway. We do not need to be angry with a person. It's much better if we develop kindness and compassion and understand that when we act out of anger, we will also receive the consequences of our deeds. So it's the best not to be too concerned about other people, what other people do, what other people don't do, but better to concentrate on our own actions. So this is in short what the Buddha said about how to deal with anger. First of all, loving kindness. Secondly, compassion. Thirdly, equanimity. Fourthly, not to pay attention to the person. And fifthly, to reflect on the law of karma, that we are all the owner of our own deeds, of our own actions.